It's my pleasure to introduce Chuck Pfluger. He's the president of Fifth Dimension Marketing, a company that maximizes internet-based e-business development to accelerate sales for oil field service providers. Now, most of our conversation in the last couple of days have been really B2C, so it's interesting to me that the leader of one of our sessions is really much more B2B and certainly oriented towards heavy industry and a traditional Texas industry, to be sure. Chuck developed the Fifth Dimension strategic marketing and sales acceleration process based on over 40 years of relevant experiences covering all facets of marketing and business development while working in the US and in Asia. Chuck, thank you for joining us.
First of all, I'd like to have the commercial services people that represent Asia stand up and take a bow. They're over there. So they're your contact if you have any questions about anything relating to Asia. And secondly, I'd like you all to kind of understand that on this panel, I think you got some very powerful people here, because on this panel, we represent two of the largest online retailers in Asia. We represent one of the largest leading logistics companies in Asia. And we represent one of the largest leading software companies in Asia to keep all of this running. So this is a panel discussion that I want to make as interactive as possible, because I don't want to be the guy that's just up here posing questions. In order for this to be effective, you all need to be asking questions, because you really do have some of the most powerful people in the industry sitting here, so tap their brains, get into their heads. So we want questions like, how do you develop the appropriate go-to-market strategy? What are the logistics of getting products into market and onto the end user from their points of view in terms of how they do it to satisfy the millions of customers that they're already dealing with? What kind of market research do you undertake in order to figure out which products sell? In fact, how do you determine what a successful selling product is and what isn't? How do you keep the movement fresh? How do you display this? How do you make a customer experience something that exceeds expectations? And how do you handle the logistics of returns and stuff like that? But before we start, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves, state a little bit about your background, your company, and pose one of the issues or serious challenges that you are either facing now or you're about to face. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll start. Guys, welcome and thanks for coming. My name is Reed Wagner. I'm with Rakuten Ichiba, which is the Japanese e-commerce marketplace. So I've spent most of my career in cross-border e-commerce. I worked for a small freight forwarding company originally. I did some time at eBay with their global shipping program. Currently at Rakuten, we just started a small office in San Mateo, California. And we are there to support you guys, US merchants, retailers and brands who are looking to sell into Japan. So we help you create a web presence on the online marketplace in Japan, also offer demand generation solutions as well as logistics. So it's a full service solution for anybody looking to sell from the US into Japan.
Carl?
Hi, I'm Carl Hartman, CEO and co-founder of Tamando. So what Tamando is smart delivery software that powers a little bit over 55,000 retailers globally. And we have a multi-carrier system, so one integration to us connects you to several hundred shipping providers all around the world. And what we've done is we've taken those integrations and we've integrated with most of the different e-commerce platforms that you would build your web stores on, and also have relationships with the marketplaces as well. So the two things we look to achieve for retailers, one is how do we help make more sales? So if you've ever bought something online, you'll know that abandonment is still 70–80%. And the number one reason of that is shipping. So naturally, if you can use technology to reduce the shipping costs, you will sell more. And if you can also, and perhaps more importantly, offer more delivery options and a better customer experience, that helps sales go as well. And we automate everything to do with actually executing your logistics strategy.
Pramod?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pramod Lakshminarayan. I represent Flipkart from India. Flipkart is India's largest e-commerce portal. We retail products across 70 categories. About 28 to 30 million products are listed on our site. We are a company into its 8th year of operations. We have done roughly $4.5 million as of last year. Currently, the challenge for us is in terms of scaling up. Because we address a huge and a very diverse market in a country like India, and how much ever you scale up, it's just not something that can cope up with the demand that is just coming up. India is a very emerging e-commerce market, so the demand is growing by 30% month on month. So that's a challenge we are focusing on right now in terms of scaling up and scaling up without actually affecting the end consumer in terms of higher costs.
Good afternoon. My name is Simeon Lin. I was born in Taiwan, but raised in U.S. A bit of the West Coast, a bit of East Coast. And about 10 years ago, I moved out to Shanghai, China, and been there ever since. I currently work for SingPost, Singapore Postal Service, but we also have an e-commerce division, and that is the division I run in China. Biggest challenge for us is that one is to get people stop thinking us as a postal office. We still do the postal services, but we're doing much more than that. We're moving into the e-commerce platform. We're enabling clients to have their own platform, and we're also enabling clients to be on marketplaces in Asia. The second big challenge that we have is convincing clients that Asia is a market you can dabble into. It's not as dangerous, it's not that risky. I know a lot of clients, their main concern is IP, intellectual property, counterfeits, and yes, those are legit concerns that you have, but as the middle class in Asia continue to grow and to become more powerful and their purchasing power becomes greater, they're not looking for just the cheap stuff. They're not looking for counterfeits. They're actually looking for authenticity and genuine products from coming in from outside of Asia, from Europe and from US.
So let's turn this over to y'all for some questions. There are a couple of people in the audience that have microphones. Anybody want to ask a question? There we go, over here.
Yeah, Nathan Muncaster from Polyart Products. And this is more of a general question, but for Flipkart specific, just because I've been in India a number of times recently, I've read how Flipkart deliveries are done by motorcycle, and there's the multiple issues to the fact that the backpacks get overloaded, so it can cause some accidents, but more than that, they often have to climb 8-10-story buildings with these very heavy backpacks. So I was just curious how Flipkart was evolving that model, or just comment on how you address that.
Sure. See, the problem in India when it comes to the last mile delivery is tremendous. Go to different cities, the challenges are very different. If you go to the bigger cities like Mumbai or Delhi, probably what concern you addressed about a delivery boy having to climb up multiple stairs, multiple floors, or carrying his backpack could be valid. Having said that, so some of the smaller cities, that may not be a valid concern altogether. So in these cities, what we are also trying to do is we are trying to rework the way the entire logistics are carried out. So of late, over the last 1 year, we've tried to develop more hubs and across the city, so that primarily between the hubs, the transportation takes place in mini trucks or smaller vehicles which are more suitable to Indian conditions. And then at the last mile, actually, if somebody has to enter an apartment complex where only some of the apartment complexes have this rule that a delivery person cannot enter a lift with his baggage. We find some kind of solution where we either request the residents to come down, or this person deposits everything else that he's carrying with the security guard of the building, and then just picks up that one package and goes. So there's no one answer for these kind of challenges. It has to be completely localized, and it's a continuously evolving process.
Over here, please. Sir, behind you.
Hi, I'm on mic. Jerome from Quality Merchant Services. A question for Ms. Lin. I understand that you are based in China, and what is your marketing plan in terms of the Southeast Asia market in relating to the One Belt One Road plan in China? And secondly, is that what is your cross-border payment solution?
Great. Very good questions. One Belt, One Road, for many of us who may not know what that is an initiative that is started by our president, Xi Jinping, when he took office, and that is kind of to connect China and all the way into the Middle East with a lot of cities, emerging markets, to connect them and to use China as kind of like a supporter, big brother, helping them economically to help them build. So in terms of that, Singapore is actually situated. We are currently very well situated in the Southeast Asia region. So aside from China, if you're looking at SingPost e-commerce, we have already provided our e-commerce solution to 11 countries in the Southeast Asia region. So in terms of that, we're actually doing very well. Of course, we will continue to try to locate more countries in the Southeast Asia region, but right now we are pretty well established. We're serving Thailand, we're serving Vietnam, we're moving into Cambodia. So those are kind of in line with that One Belt, One Road. The second question, payments. Payments, we're working with a lot of different banks in China. Banks in China wants to go outside of China as well. They want to pull in as much foreign investment as possible. So one of the banks that we're working, actually one of the biggest state-owned enterprise banks is ICBC. And ICBC has established branches all throughout the world, one which sits in Singapore, and we're working closely with them in terms of how people who want to invest or consumers who want to purchase can just go through their local ICBC bank branch instead of getting an account set up in China. So that's kind of the solution that we're working with. In terms of marketplace, a lot of the marketplaces in China, they already have their kind of payment solutions already. So we're just gonna leverage off of that instead of adding more to it. Yeah, making things more complicated.
Another question? Okay, I've got one. We talked about delivery system, and just during the break, heard a conversation about drone deliveries. So, is that real?
Yes, I think so. I believe so. That's happening currently in our headquarters. We're testing it out. Singapore is so small, so that it's it's a good place to test it out, to use our drones. We don't know if it's actually going to work. We hope it does.
So how does that work? I mean, you just get this machine flying overhead and it just parachutes it in?
That I haven't witnessed it yet. I would like to witness. I'm actually based in Shanghai, so it's very hard for me to get over, and they don't invite me for the fun stuff.
Carl, do you know?
So full disclosure, I'm an investor in one of the main logistic drone startups called Flirty. Definitely check out their videos on YouTube, they're quite fun. So they're probably one of the ones that pioneered it. One of the reasons I invested in it, actually, they have a patent about knowing how to crash properly. And I figured that's probably a good idea. And I looked at how it works, and if you see some of the mishaps that's happened with drones, I think that's actually making sure that it can be done safely is one of the fundamental deliverables that are needed to actually execute this at a proper commercial model. From a practicality perspective, there's very few countries you can actually use it. The one that is doing it properly at the moment is New Zealand. And one of the reasons is New Zealand is very geographically isolated with population, very low density. So if you think about rural goods delivery, and I think the Singapore example that was literally a couple of days ago is much along the same lines, where if you've got some outlying islands, you have a high cost by going by boat, where you use a drone, I mean, you're literally talking probably 30 to 50 cents. So how this one particularly works is it has a long cable, and it drops it down to preset spots. So at the moment it's very hub to hub. or it needs someone to actually physically control it using cameras, and then they are getting to a point of being automated. But most of the practical ones with the cable, if someone tries to pull it, the cable will break. So think of one of those lizards that can, drop its tail. It's just modeled on a similar type of thing. The practicalities in terms of being a proper commercial model though, I see the first implication with urgent things. So we were talking earlier about medicine. I mentioned in Australia about having, and I'm sure you all know, but Australia has 7 of the 10 most deadliest creatures in the world. So naturally, if you get bitten by a snake that can kill you in 30 minutes, having a button on a phone that could send you an anti-venom, I don't mean to scare you from going to Australia, it's really a safe and wonderful place. But,
He works for the tourism board.
yeah, no, in fact, I told this story at a conference in Paris a few days ago. People, I think, were going pale, but no, quite genuinely, if you think of the medical implications, I think that's probably the first practical thing. I mean, think of someone that has a peanut allergy and they need, something. I mean, you have a very narrow period of time, and I think if drones are actually carrying things like medicine, people are going to be more accepting. I was asked a question 2 weeks ago at a conference about could they ever deliver the mail? And if you do the math on that, about how many delivery points there are and the type of density you would need, it would be the noisiest future ever. It would sound like a swarm of mosquitoes. So I think practically, in terms of changing your mailman, probably not. But in terms of a just-in-time style, we all know here if Jeff Bezos has his way, Prime will be coming to you in 30 minutes. On the right type of goods, I can see that happening, but there's a lot of regulatory stuff that has to happen before that.
Interesting. So with respect to the 2 larger online marketplaces here, there have got to be a gazillion number of issues that you both face every day, just in being able to manage, all the orders coming in, keeping customers satisfied. How do you do that?
Yeah, I can start. So as far as the order management, it's not really as sophisticated or complicated as many people might imagine. The technology is really in place to relay the orders from the Japanese server that we operate on the online marketplace into whatever inventory management system you guys are already running in the US. So, there's a language complication that the product feed might be in Japanese and you can't read it, but it's a small hurdle. There are many solutions to overcoming that, even if it's just a human translator taking it one by one before it feeds it back to your system. But I think the operational requirements are just not as daunting as they seem to a lot of people. It seems like a massive challenge, like how are you going to operate this e-commerce store in another country, in another language? But once you really look into the details of what does it take to operate on a marketplace in another country, in the case of Rakuten, it's Japan specifically, but it's not so much different than if you're already selling like on a US-based marketplace. If you sell on Amazon, which many US-based merchants find to be a necessity, it's basically the same operation selling in a foreign market. It's just you've got a little bit extra to go distance-wise, and maybe there are a few more operational steps. But time management and just general commitment, it's relatively a similar experience.
Pramod?
Yeah, so coming to the way Flipkart operates, I think I agree with Reid when he said that basically the technology is robust, so a lot of operational issues are not actually as daunting as they seem. Yes, we do operate at a very high scale, but then our technology is at par with any other international marketplace. So a lot of times, the package is tracked point to point, and people are able to figure out where their package is, at what point it would be delivered. In fact, our customers have this option of being able to pick time slot and deliveries. They can even actually ask the delivery man to come in at a particular time, and the person lands up at that pre-appointed time. So we've evolved all this in-house through a very strong tech force, that has been working on the development right since the company was started off. So we are constantly working on innovations like that. In the event that something does go wrong, we have a very strong customer service team that kind of is constantly monitoring almost everything. So at any given point in time, customers are away, just a telephone call away or an email away, or even a complaint on social media platforms away. Somebody makes a complaint on Facebook or Twitter, there's a team that is designated to even just tracking that and picking it up and treating it as a complaint and trying and resolving the problems. And we fix a very short turnaround time for that as well. So within 48 hours, about 95% of the problems are resolved.
Okay. Any questions? I think so.
Yes, my name is Srini Vasan with the Issue Global. Here, it's a general question. A lot of entrepreneurs, exporters, businesses, everybody there, they want to do business overseas, especially South Pacific Asian countries. Plenty of opportunities and e-commerce opportunities, cross-border opportunities. Now, if I'm an American company or exporter want to sell in India, take example, do you have some sort of interface where I can upload all my catalog items, make it available to Indian customer base, and same as in other countries? So would you kind enough to explain how to do this business for American products and services, exporters?
Okay, so probably I'll explain that a little in detail. To answer your question first, do we have some kind of an interface which allows your products to be integrated with our platform? Yes, our tech force is capable of doing an API integration with your server and getting your products listed online, so you could do your drop shipment or whatever other business model that you would eventually agree with Flipkart. That is, having said that, that's not the only way of coming on board Flipkart. We are basically a complete go-to-market platform where there are a whole lot of challenges if you as an entrepreneur want to get into India, and with the kind of diverse market that it is very difficult because it needs a lot of money that you need to invest if you have to set up an offline channel. But what we do is we work with various service providers with whom we have integrated various areas of work over the last few years. So right from getting your products certified for an entry into India according to the Government of India regulations, managing your product launch, your brand entry into the country, brand launch, brand positioning, managing your product pricing strategies. Of course, our own logistics will take care of your distribution and supply chain. And also, Flipkart owns one of the after-sales service companies for electrical items. For electronic items, we have strategic tie-ups with after-sales service providers. So, end to end, we try and provide solutions on a turnkey basis for brands wanting to enter India. So, if there are American companies wanting to enter India, you don't really have to step into India to do that. We will enable you to list your products and start selling with us, sitting right here in America.
And I might build on that a little bit by, again, kind of diminishing the hurdle of the product management in the first place. Like, to get the products online in a foreign market is not really a challenge, but many people approach that problem from the perspective of, okay, can I push a button and have all 10,000 of my SKUs like immediately enabled on the foreign marketplace? Whether or not that's a possibility, it may not be the most successful approach. I think a more successful approach is to take a more careful approach to merchandising and select carefully the SKUs that you think are going to be the most successful, and to take a little bit more time with each product to kind of craft and message and make sure that the product is reaching the market in a way that's going to communicate with an effective message that customers are going to be able to connect with. And I mean, that takes a little bit more hands-on commitment than just the push-button technology solution. I mean, the technology has to be there for sure. Once that's in place, I think it's important not to overlook the marketing and the merchandising aspect of it.
Question?
Sorry, can I just add to that real quick?
Yeah.
Taking a look at it from a different angle, because both these two gentlemen are talking from a marketplace standpoint. We're actually marketplace enabler, so we are kind of that transition from US, from Europe into Southeast Asia, into China. So whatever, that's the service that we provide. We help you with the marketing, we help you with the merchandising, we help you with uploading and getting it onto the marketplaces. And I think the challenge that we have is that We need to retain talent and resources that have a good understanding of both the West and East for us, Asia, the West and the East. If you just have one side, you can do that one side very well, but you completely neglect the other side. And so that's why I think in Singapore and also the team that we're building in China, it's not just leaning towards or biased towards one area, one region, but we're very well balanced. And I think that's kind of what clients, merchants should think about when they're entering into China or entering into Asia, is to think about partnering with people who have a very international team rather than a very localized team. Of course you need to go localized, but you can have that international team understanding both your local and your country.
So Carl, building upon what
Yeah, so I'll give you the Australian perspective as well. So we've worked with a lot of US retailers, and again we were talking about this earlier, and one of the first markets they often target going overseas is Australia. One of the reasons for that is it's culturally very, very similar to the US. I mean, if you ever had two people that were cut from the same cloth, it's the Australians and the Americans. Some differences in sport, but we can build on that.
And in deadly animals.
What's that?
And in deadly animals.
And deadly animals, yeah. It's all good, you adapt.
Kangaroos can kill.
Even kangaroos, I mean, yeah, they can kick. But again, it's I'll give you two different ways that typically happens. We've worked with many global US brands that will actually go to Australia and test a concept domestically. So, ship from store, for example, omni-channel, it's a big buzzword here in the US right now. We've had some US retailers that tested that 4 years ago, and then, funnily enough, using someone like Toys R Us. I mean, we're talking 4 years they've been doing ship from store in Australia. We, funnily enough, worked with SingPost when we launched into Singapore and recently Hong Kong, and China's next year, which is a big project. But again, 4 years. It's just starting to happen here. One of the reasons that's the case is you've got an isolated test market of 24 million people that's culturally very similar. So you can actually sort of A/B test things pretty quickly, learn what works, what doesn't work, and then literally cut and paste a lot of the dynamics and software straight back to the US. From a cross-border context, again, it's a fairly easy logistics market to enable. To do it cost-effectively is a whole other story. I mean, with whatever provider you're using today, you can literally click a button. But to do it cost-effectively, because you've got a landmass that is the size of the continental US, it's not without its challenges to do it cheaply. So, often it's thinking about, are you going to put inventory locally? Are you going to work with what's called a deferred shipping provider? So someone that will consolidate and then say what's called direct inject, so literally send it into the major cities, because Australia's got, you've got 75% of the population really in 5 cities. So if you can send that direct, I mean, what might cost like a £1 package that might be, say, $40, you can get that down to 10. If you can get it down to 10, you can do free shipping. If you can do free shipping, you can sell more. The other thing that both of you just touched on as well is, once you figure out what you're going to sell, from a cross-border perspective, is understanding, is there local demand? So Australia unfortunately doesn't have a Flipkart or a Rakuten. What we do have is eBay. And I know when I tell this to US customers, they're like, what do you mean? eBay's where we sell second-hand stuff. Well, in Australia, we don't have an Amazon either. There's no local Amazon. So eBay is the primary marketplace. And in fact, about, I think 80% of Australians will go there at least once a month and look at it. And almost, I think it's 90% is new goods now. And fashion is their number one vertical. So there's actually a bit of software you can look at called Terapeak. And it actually will analyze what people are searching for on eBay. So one of the things you can do is within your product category is you can literally search to see if there's demand. If there's demand, you can see what you can buy and sell for, including logistics, and what's being sold locally. Where the opportunity comes is Australia has something called the Australia tax, which basically means, because it's if you've all been to Hawaii and you notice everything costs more because it's an island and it's imported, well, Australia sort of has that effect on steroids. Some retailers have to go there and double their prices just to be in par with the local market. So the margin opportunities is actually pretty good, and if you do market your products aggressively, the potential to grab local market share is actually quite high. So the first is to understand, is there demand and how to sell in the marketplace, and there's a bunch of tools that can do that. After that, it's really thinking about duties and taxes and whether your product can be sold. This is in all regions. Again, the good thing about Australia is if you can sell it in the US, you've got a very good chance you can sell it in Australia. Other markets, China particularly, can depend on the day of the week. It literally can change that quickly. So one of the first things you should do from an execution perspective is actually, in an ideal world, if you can do what's called product classification. So literally, find out what will be the harmonized shipping code. It will make working with logistic partners a lot easier because this allows you to also predict the duties and taxes and understand if there's any product restrictions. So if you follow some of those steps, sometimes that can help in a big way.
Any questions? Right here.
Yeah, let's imagine an SME company, small, medium-sized company that did not attend this conference and is considering an e-commerce play in some country. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of, when you would hear some of the things that you're saying, it sounds pretty complex. It's easy for you folks, but for some of the small companies that might be looking at this, it's pretty daunting. What could you suggest to one of those companies to start off their e-commerce program, if you will, in the international area?
I'll go first if you like. So I think the first thing is to understand, what software are you going to use? It can be as simple as Google searching for some solutions. And I'd say then once you understand what software you're going to use, understand can it hit the markets you want. So a common solution out there, thinking from a marketplace perspective, might be something like Channel Advisor. I think speaking for all of us, the biggest challenge we all have is probably the market education. I think it's why we're all here on this panel. It's why we probably go to every panel we're asked for, because it's an overwhelming challenge actually. Because you're right, a lot of us will take this for second nature, but it's like, how do we productize that? How do we educate? And I think various government bodies are doing a good job in trying to promote that with events like these. People like the marketplaces. I see the webinars all the time. But it's how do we tell them where to go? So I think the first thing is always the software, and then from the software, it's about what's the strategy, country by country, and do it properly.
I would answer that question by suggesting to start with the demand side. Really look carefully at the markets you're considering going into, or maybe even look, instead of at the market first, look at your products and figure out where they're going to sell. There are a million solutions that you can enable to get the product to the market once you've sold it. But if you don't have a buyer, that's going to be a big problem. And no matter what software you've bought, or no matter what logistics contractor you've employed, if you don't have a sale, your product's not going anywhere. So I would really start by scoping the demand and doing some market research. Can my product sell in this market? Am I priced competitively? Who am I competing against? Those kind of questions would be the first that I'd suggest answer.
Just to follow up on that, I think a great place to test out whether your product will sell or not is in marketplaces, because marketplaces takes away, I say 60 to 70% of the work that you have to do in-house, and they're taking it on their shoulders. Payment is taken care of, logistics, they probably can provide you with some kind of logistics solution. Product uploads, they probably can help you with that. Translation, they could probably help you with that. And so the amount of investment and the amount of work that you have to do as a merchant will be minimized when you go on to marketplaces. And we see that in China, marketplaces in China, and especially government supporting cross-border e-commerce. It's really where we're pushing our clients to say, hey, test it out. Test the water, see if you like it, see if your products are good, then think about a more long-term strategy. And another thing, just come out to Asia, check us out, take a tour, take a vacation. We love to sponsor you.
To add on to all this, I think also one important factor would be the kind of distributor that you would have to choose which to do on your own in a country that you probably haven't visited earlier is a very daunting task. So that's where marketplaces like ours also come into picture, because we work with a lot of distributors across the country. So you'll be able to kind of understand what your brand vision is, and your vision for the country is, and then try and figure out if there is a suitable distributor amongst the people that we interact with. Bring the two of you together and try and make things work.
Any questions? Sir, I'm sorry, did someone say something? The flip side of the question that was just asked here, how do you keep pace with or identify the latest trend and then keep up? In other words, sometimes things happen almost instantaneously, and all of a sudden an item that just seemed to come out of the ether is now the hottest thing going. How do you maintain, how do you get into that game and keep it going? To the retailers.
Okay, if I have to answer that from an India perspective, what we do is, I think we've actually created trends. We do not try to cope up with trends, we've created trends.
Okay.
Just to give you an example, last year we started for the first time in the country something called the Big Billion Day. This is on the lines of the Black Friday that happens in America or the Singles Day in China. We created the Big Billion Day. The target was that we wanted to sell $1 billion worth of goods in a period of 24 hours. So when we actually did that, we did a small campaign around that. We did a good build-up, and on the day that we actually went live, we managed to achieve that number in a little over 7 hours. So it was the talk of the country, and it was something that choked up the supply chain in the country, not just our supply chain, but the entire country's supply chain for the next 1.5 months. With people trying to deliver whatever was ordered in those 7 hours. So like that, we keep trying to create a trend by ourselves, but we are also abreast of whatever happens in the market, because a lot of our people in the category are working at a category level, interacting with people in that particular industry. So they're constantly updated about what is happening. So it doesn't come as a surprise.
Okay, Reed?
I can echo what Pramod said. We do a lot of demand generation at Rakuten as well in Japan. It's by far and away, Rakuten in the marketplace is the biggest e-commerce player in the country. Everyone knows it. There are nationally televised events. There are events that tie into national holidays. We own a baseball team, and we do events that are tied to the wins or losses of the baseball team. We do a lot specifically with U.S. merchants to help demand generation from Japanese customers, get Japanese customers shopping from the U.S., get them coming back to you as a merchant, maybe not so much about following trends or catching up with trends, but about generating the demand from the Japanese side and getting the customers interested in U.S. sellers.
So for us as representatives of retailers and merchants, it's very hard for us to create demand that will cost a lot in marketing, in our strategy. So what we tend to do is, in China, we look at what are the products that has the pricing, the cost of the products is double or triple what is being sold in US or in Europe. And that is a good indicator of there is that demand and people are willing to pay for that product at that price, but there's not enough supply for this particular merchandise or this particular product. And so we try to target those kind of categories. And the categories we found is a lot of people are looking at vitamins, a lot of people are looking at supplements, health supplements, mother-baby care products is huge. Milk powder is starting to, the pricing is actually starting to level off. Diapers was huge like 2-3 years ago.
I had these Australian retailers and they made so much money.
Yes,
because just
correct.
Like catnip there.
A lot of New Zealand and a lot of Australian, we buy a lot of that because some of that stuff is not that safe in China, unfortunately. And also, fashion is huge. But in terms of cross-border fashion, that is not, it's not very easy because the sizing differences, then you have to think about returns. So we kind of avoid the categories that's kind of already well established within the country, and then we're looking at a big price difference.
There was a comment made yesterday that 50% of the online shoppers check out the return policy before buying. Is that something that you all see?
Yeah, it's actually the single biggest influence on conversion rate. So the quickest way for you to make more sales is fix your return policy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be free, but it does have to be easy because, put your consumer hat on, think you're buying a pair of shoes. The thing that is going through your head is, what if the shoe doesn't fit? So if you see most of the best performing websites around the world, they'll have this big giant banner up the very top of the header of the page, and it'll have the shipping policy and the returns policy. So sometimes, from a US context, domestically, it might be free shipping, free returns. Obviously, for international, that's not always possible, but we've worked with folks like ASOS implementing, working with their global returns, and often when it has to be repatriated somewhere, it might get consolidated in country. So they might cover the first, get the customer to pay for that first mile, or give it to free for premium customers. And then they might cover it going back to the other side of the world because it's not always their fault. And that's often a good way to bring it down because a single package being returned might be like $40. However, if you optimize that, if you can do that for say, 10, because every Friday you send them back, again, literally can double conversion.
Okay.
And that's kind of what you have to think about when you're doing cross-border e-commerce, because that return policy is going to take a big chunk out of your profit. If you have to pay for the returns on behalf of the consumers, then that's gonna add up eventually. Okay. So
that's right.
Merchandising is very important in terms of e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce.
Okay, we have a question here.
Hello, thank you gentlemen for being here. Good afternoon. Here's my question. You mentioned about marketing. Before you sell anything, you have to know there's a market. You have to know your target audience. So here's what I'm asking. Do you recommend any companies that are established, competent, reliable, that you could recommend that do marketing for startups or new or middle-sized entrepreneurs?
I'll answer it from a Japan perspective. We absolutely 100% encourage U.S. merchants who are trying to sell into Japan to work with a local partner who is very familiar with the Japanese market. They understand the web dynamic, they understand the customer profiles, they understand local buying behaviors. It's possible to go in and do it yourself, and especially for larger companies who may already have some local capabilities, maybe that's an option. But unless you've got a local team who's already in the country, I would very much advise to buddy up with somebody who knows the market very well and can offer you strategic advice.
So from a Flipkart perspective, what we've done is we've set up in-house advertising agencies. So while we encourage brands to come on board with us through a distributor, we also are in constant engagement with both the distributor as well as the brand. So when it comes to the marketing, the market research or market intelligence, the advertising, everything, we are directly in contact with the brand through our in-house advertising agency, and we help them actually devise marketing and advertising campaigns, and we help them get that executed. And the good thing is that we try to do it at very low costs, probably a fraction of the cost that you would otherwise incur if you had to go through the traditional advertising agency route.
And just to add on to that, it's similar to the marketplaces in China. A lot of that marketing is actually part of the marketplace. So going back to what we were saying about this gentleman's question, if you do go on marketplaces, a lot of that overhead cost can be removed. A lot of that, a lot of that resources that you have to put into if you were to do it in-house could be removed and could be placed on marketplaces. In China, our marketplaces has its own performance marketing, and I think for small, medium enterprises coming into Asia, they should focus on performance marketing rather than brand marketing first. Get your products out in the market, see if it works. If it works, then think about how you're going to market your brand.
If I can just build on that also, because the second part about marketing is actually logistics experience as well. So part of what we're doing, and my company Temando is a global company. I mean, we're in Europe, Asia, and also the US, and probably pretty uniquely like with that spread too. But when we're onboarding customers, our role is very much about educating what logistic providers can do. So to give a nice friendly example, let's say you're starting to target Singapore. Singapore Post, as an example, will be rolling out these things called pop stations, which are parcel lockers. And Singaporeans now expect that at the checkout, even on a US website, when sending to Singapore. So it's all about understanding what is the physical interaction they're going to have with your brand. Because if you're selling to a new country and your brand's not established and you don't have stores, the only interaction they're going to have is the physical one. So the importance to curate this delivery experience and understanding, what is the speed? Are you going to use an express provider? Are you going to use deferred? Once it gets there, what last mile experience are you going to offer? We've seen some premium brands that have entered, say, US to Europe, for example, really look at collection points there, because a place like the UK actually has a third of all deliveries are now going to a collection point. So it's becoming sort of an expectation. Particularly from an Australian perspective, Australia is a very mature market when it comes to delivery expectations. Almost all the major retailers do offer same-day delivery. Almost all of them are doing things like click and collect. So again, I can't underestimate that importance to understand how that is going to be part of the marketing experience. And certainly, our software helps you actually enable that.
So speaking of experiences, how do you all measure customer satisfaction? Or do you?
I could say from a delivery perspective, it's easy because, there's a couple of ways that feedback loop happens. One, we aggregate all the tracking data from all the different couriers you use, be that domestic or international. Understanding failure rate, so what percentage of orders got there in time, and we provide that analytics layer back to the customer, because all of a sudden, if you're sending it to the other side of the world, and you start to get posts on Facebook saying, "Where's my delivery?" That's generally the first indication, but naturally prevention is better than cure. So different providers on different lanes are going to have different success rates. So the first is going to be delivered on time, and then it's understanding if there is a failure, what happened. And one of the things that our software can do is actually give the retailer the ability to set rules right down to a zip code, postcode, SKU, because sometimes it might be individual products that are problematic. So if you're sending bulky goods to the other side of the world, the last mile's hard. Sometimes it might be a driver in one postcode that's just not very good. So rather than switch carriers just because of one particular driver, being able to curate that becomes pretty important. So analytics is how we do it.
And how about the customer experience from shopping on your websites?
Yeah, for us in Japan, I think it really comes down to repeat buys. We really try to be a merchant-centric marketplace, so we're not looking to simply sell products where the customer makes a purchase from one store the next day. The next time they want to buy something, they go to the other store. We want customers coming back to the same merchant again and again. So I don't know what the audience's experience with Japan is, but if you go there very immediately, you'll notice that it's an extremely service-oriented culture, and the customers have a very high expectation as far as what customer service is. So any kind of problems, we really encourage merchants to mitigate as quickly and reasonably as possible. And we offer a lot of kind of automated tools as well as kind of things that you can opt in and out of in order to keep customers coming back to the same store and making repeat purchases. So that's the focus.
So speaking of that, in terms of customer retention, do you all offer programs and policies to keep customers coming back, frequent flyer points or something similar?
I know we do on Rakuten. We have a lot of loyalty programs that merchants can participate in. It's optional, but most merchants definitely get advantages from participating in those programs and encouraging customers to come back with, it's called Super Points is our loyalty program, but it works very much like a frequent flyer program, yeah.
And how about India?
Okay, to answer the question on customer satisfaction, I think we look at it from two aspects. One is from an internal company point of view, there are enough checks built into the system that we have developed so that on a weekly basis we are able to analyze our performance in terms of delivery, in terms of efficiency, in terms of just about anything that our analytics team would need to consider. So that's a standard weekly report that does get circulated among a few people who are responsible for ensuring that efficiencies are maintained. That happens very regularly. from a customer perspective, what we also do is from time to time we keep running some what we call the CSAT, customer satisfaction survey. So a lot of customers get to answer a very small questionnaire which determines how satisfied they are with our delivery, our performance. And we try to ensure that it doesn't slip below 95% or 94% mark at any given point in time.
And repeat purchases, loyalty programs?
Sorry. Loyalty program, yes. What we have done is instead of having loyalty programs per se, what we have tried to introduce a couple of features like we have a club membership kind of thing, which involves a one-time payment of around 500 rupees, which is roughly about $6 to $7. And once you make that, there are a whole lot of special features that we extend to our customers who are registered.
It's like Amazon Prime, yeah.
Yeah, like that. So you get your same-day deliveries free of cost. A lot of shipping charges, which could otherwise be a little higher, are on the lower side. So we have policies like this, which are aimed at getting customers back. And from a vendor perspective, I think I spoke about the Big Billion Day last year. So we are doing this year. We are doing Big Billion Days. So that's running from 13th to 17th the coming week. So what we're trying to do is last year we had some technical hitches. We ran out of supplies very fast. So this year we tried to ramp up operations so much that we have spoken to vendors right since the beginning of the year. We've offered free return tickets to Europe and other exotic places in the world so that they stock up enough and we ensure that the customer experience is very smooth.
And your merchants in China?
Well, it's kind of difficult for us to do the customer check, customer service, because our clients work with us daily. We're in constant communication constant communication with them, and because of that, I think we build our customer satisfaction comes from the relationship that we establish with our customers, with our clients, and because of that, we don't really have anything really set in place to gauge how well we're doing. Because if they're not happy with us, they'll just give us a phone call and chew us out in front. Then we go to work.
We have a question here.
Hi, Derek Edmond, co-marketing. We're a marketing agency out of Boston. Just kind of curious how mobile device adoption has changed, or if you can share any insights on how that's impacted the buying process and how customers are using your sites and your applications.
Anyone?
Okay, from an India perspective, let me answer that. If you look at the way India evolved, I think the market really opened up in the early 90s, after the liberalization of the economy. And that was when the IT boom in India also started off. So at that point in time, you'll find that most of the tier 1 cities were the major beneficiaries of this particular trend. So your computers, either desktops or laptops, were mostly found in these places. The same thing did not percolate down to tier 2, tier 3 cities. But today, Indians are buying smartphones. Almost every second, somebody is buying a smartphone at any given point in time in India. So these smartphones also come with a very cheap internet access, data connectivity at very low rates. So most of the internet access in tier 2, tier 3 cities are driven on the handphone rather than on the desktops or the laptops. So if you look at our own mobile app, for instance, we have around 33 million registered users on our site. 75 to 80% of the traffic today comes from our mobile app. Only about 20 to 25% is still remaining on the website. In fact, the fashion portal that we took over, it is called Myntra. Myntra.com, it is today a Flipkart company. They've become a complete app-only platform. They do not have their website anymore. In fact, there was talk about Flipkart also going the same way, but we have kept it open because certain parts of the country still do not have very good mobile connectivity. So today we are very busy working out a lot of features for our apps, and we are trying to customize the app to make the customer experience much more enriching one.
Reed, how would you answer that?
We have a very high rate of mobile purchases in Japan as well. Rakuten specifically makes it very easy. It's not something that sellers have to worry about. Any products that are listed on the desktop website automatically convert into a mobile-friendly version, so anyone shopping on a mobile device is presented with a very clean, navigable e-commerce experience. But you know, in answer to your question, overall Japan, very high level of mobile transactions, and it's easy for customers to shop that way.
In terms of the back end, the deliveries, the logistics part, as long as you get it into the system, I think everything continues. So the mobile commerce is not, we don't see it as, at least at SingPost e-commerce, we don't see it as a disruptor. We see it as something that is helping and driving the whole total e-commerce.
One thing it is doing though is there's been a massive change in consumer expectations. So I regularly talk about the Uberification of everything. You know, we're becoming as consumers conditioned to get out our phone, press a button, and something happens. So when we look at a lot of the consumer research in Asia in specific, because the smartphone penetration is so high, and because there is all these services which is all on demand, what it means that through mobile commerce, the customer expectations, particularly for delivery, are going to be very high. So if you think of the underpinning consumer use case that's behind it, you know, someone pulling out their phone, they're ready to buy now. They're looking to take action. So the things going through their head is how much does it cost, and when am I going to get it? And then it's about the trust that they're going to get it. So we see a massive correlation between mobile commerce and same-day delivery. So to give you an example that's very prevalent in Asia, they'll be in a store, they'll be looking, they'll look at the price, they'll look up, you go into Google Shopping, they'll go on the local marketplace, they'll see who else has it, and then they're trying to find local inventory. And whether that local inventory is available determines whether they buy or not. But at the same time, they'll look at an overseas alternative. So to give you an example, you know, when I was living in Australia, I'm based in San Francisco now, so I get to purchase things at US prices, which is much better than Australia, I can tell you that much. But when I lived in Australia, what I'd do is I would be in the store, I'd get out Google Shopping, I'd type in the price, and then I'd go on google.com because I compare the US price to the Australia price. And if I could find it cheaper in the US, I don't care if it takes 2 weeks to get to me. But the shipping will determine whether that cost differential is enough or not, because if it's, say, a $200 item plus $50 shipping, and I can get it for the equivalent of $250 US in Australia, well, I might just buy it locally. But if I can get it for, say, $200 free shipping, even if it took 2 weeks, I'd probably save the $50 I didn't need it then and there. So, you know, they're the sort of things to consider. And I would say your Asian clients, including Australia in that sort of, subset, are probably amongst the most savvy in the world, very mobile centric. I mean, you guys don't even have a proper website anymore, it's all mobile, right?
Yeah, it's almost all mobile,
Yeah.
but we still have the website version.
And China actually is, probably the most demanding. People, often go, really, China? But, I mean, not only do they expect it in 1 hour, they expect it to be cash on delivery. And then they expect the return to be free if it doesn't fit. So build that into your cost model, my God.
Any questions?